Wonderful. A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining this event of the Adaptation Action Coalition on the sectoral workstreams. And I think we're going to have a very exciting session today with lots of practical examples how we can actually get things done. Because if we look at the momentum of this climate conference, and like I suppose many of you, I've been to a number of them, we've been talking very much about commitments, but we need to start translating those commitments into actions. And the Adaptation Action Coalition has really been doing this for a long time. In February 2022, the IPCC Working Group 2 reported climate change impacts have been observed in all regions and ecosystems in the world. And their magnitude and extent are already severe and widespread, and that at 1.2 degrees. And we all know too that these impacts disproportionately affect the most vulnerable, particularly in the least developed countries and small island developing states. And they contribute to food and water insecurity, to poverty, to conflict, to displacement, and to biodiversity loss. So urgent action is needed to adapt to climate change and to build resilience of people, economies, and ecosystems in all warming scenarios. The IPCC report also found that a range of highly effective and feasible adaptation solutions, many of which countries are beginning to implement, as this session will demonstrate, are actually there. So we can do this. But while the knowledge of that adaptation action works is gaining momentum, the progress is still far too slow. That's also what the report noted. In part because global efforts thus far have focused largely on planning rather than implementation. And if we want to show to people that we can actually create change for them, we need to go for that last mile through the implementation. This session will confront the observed trend, but also how to turn the tide to answer that final question of how can we actually deliver for people. This event is organized by the Adaptation Action Coalition, or AAC, which is a coalition of over 40 member countries working together to accelerate adaptation at the national, subnational and local levels. Currently, the AAC is co-chaired by UK and Egypt, and the World Resources Institute, where I am Vice President, is hosting the Secretariat. The AAC aims to be a global hub for peer-to-peer knowledge exchange with a focus on implementing adaptation through its sectoral work streams of water, health, infrastructure, locally led adaptation, and newly launched work stream of disaster risk reduction. Today's event will highlight how countries engaging in the AAC work streams are assisting countries to speed up implementation of national and local led priorities. So with no further ado, because we've got a lot of very interesting speakers and want to make sure they have enough time, let me welcome our esteemed panelists, and I'll introduce them more properly to you in a minute. From Jamaica, Madagascar, Nepal and Japan, we're very, very glad to have you here with us today. Could I please invite you to come forward so that I can properly introduce you? I will take the first seat here, please, so that I can do the interview with all of you from a bit more closer. So first of all, I'd love to introduce to you Mr. Matthew Samuda of the Ministry for Economic Growth and Job Creation in Jamaica. He's been consistently working on environmental preservation and protection actually throughout most of his career. A warm welcome to you. Dr. Nora Hashina is Director of Climate Change and Health at the Ministry of Public Health in Madagascar, and she's a national focal point on health and climate for the country and has been involved in the public health sector in Madagascar since, I would nearly say forever, but to be more precise, since 2003. Dr. Kandel is Secretary of the Ministry of Forest and Environment in Nepal, and he has worked with the government of Nepal for the last 35 years in many senior positions. But what I'd particularly like to highlight is that he is known for his innovative approaches. So we'll be really looking forward to hearing much more from you. I think that is what we need, also policy innovations in getting it implemented and approach innovation. And we talked about this before. I know you're going to help us out there. And then finally, very honored to have Mr. Hiroshi Ono. He's Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs for the Ministry of Environment of Japan. He has had a long-standing career in environmental experience, also at the Ministry of Health and Welfare and the World Bank, financing adaptation in East Africa. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I would love to suggest that we do this in 2 rounds. First, I will ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce some of their perspectives, and then I'd love to go for some discussion. So please allow me to take a next seat. Mr. Samura, could I ask you to briefly reflect on your adaptation accomplishments over the past year, and also looking ahead, what are the most important steps that you feel that you should be taking as you come back from this COP, I was going to say. And then I will ask the same question to each of the other panelists, and I would really appreciate if you could keep your intervention to a few minutes, because I want to hear from all of you extensively. So, Mr. Samura, please, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you here this morning. The last year has been the culmination of a lot of previous work. Jamaica would have finished its National Adaptation Plan and would have filed with the UNFCCC. And in particular, one of our biggest achievements, which we spoke about and have been speaking about in a number of other fora, has been the launch of the JSTRAT. The JSTRAT is a Jamaica Systemic Risk Assessment Tool. It is the result of collaboration between the CCRI, funded by the GCF, collaboration from the University of Oxford, and indeed several players in the Jamaican government. It is a predictive tool that assesses infrastructure for resilience and guides investment as you ensure that the investment itself is fit for purpose for the risks that you face. Jamaica is on the front lines of climate change. The pace of adaptation is indeed picking up. I believe it is a little slower than it needs to be, and we have a lot of work to do. But this tool, we believe, will guide us and provide the roadmap to making the investments that are absolutely critical for our survival. And for context, for those who aren't familiar with the Jamaican situation, the Jamaican population, 70% of which lives within 5 kilometers of the sea, in low-lying areas. So adaptation is not an option for us in terms of that space. And what it does mean for us is that we have to be as strong as we've been and even stronger in accessing adaptation finance. And for that, we've been working with the NDC partnership as close partners to ensure that the mechanisms that are available to small island developing states are accessed in a timely fashion. Like others, our rainfall for the last 30 years has seen general declines, but even worse, it's become more erratic. So in May of this year, for instance, we would have had 11% of our 30-year average. But the very next month, in one afternoon, we had 200% of our 30-year average in June. So that tells you the absolute need to ensure that our adaptation program is indeed streamlined appropriately.
Thank you so much. And coming from a very low-lying country myself, my house is situated 7 meters below sea level, and many of the Dutch people living in same conditions in that sense. I fully appreciate the challenges that you're sketching of the need for water management in the context of the more erratic weather patterns that we're seeing. And I think you also very much highlighted that there's not just a need for more finance, there is, but also the quality of finance. What can it finance? So thank you so much for bringing this to us. I'd love to go to Dr. Nora Hashina now. So for you, what has been the most important achievements over the past year, and what are you trying to get back to as you go back from COP to work on adaptation action? Over to you, please.
Thank you very much. The health is one of priority in our national plan adaptation. So the Ministry of Health in Madagascar has focused on adaptation and resilience issues since 2008 as a result of the implementation of a project initiated by the World Meteorological Organization in collaboration with the World Health Organization and other international actors, which project aimed to facilitate the health sector's use of climate and weather parameters. The government of Madagascar has submitted its commitment on building climate resilient and sustainable low carbon health system during the launch of the COP26 health program led by WHO and the UK Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. Based on the effective partnership with the Ministry of Health and our General Directorate Meteorology, the availability of climate and meteorological information and data allowed us to develop strategic, technical, and operational reference materials, such as the report of a study of a vulnerability and adaptive capacity assessment of health sector to climate change, the strategic and national plan, adaptation plan, the technical guides on health and climate, and the training curriculum, and the climate health bulletin. Also, with the continued support of WHO and other stakeholders like GIZ or UNDP, we have supported the capacity building on climate and health to our local actors. Madagascar is now actively engaged to implement our COP26 health commitments for enhancing the resilience of the health sector and ensuring that its population, particularly the vulnerable groups, are protected by the effect of climate change on health.
Thank you so much. I think maybe not everybody who's not so much involved in adaptation would intuitively connect health to adaptation. But if there's one sector where you can immediately save lives, it is of course in ensuring that your health sector is resilient. So thank you so much for explaining that, and also the need for science to be translated into basically local assessments, because the effects of climate change will be more erratic, but they will also differ very much from country to country, from region to region. So to translate that science into actual localized disaster risk reduction plans is absolutely going to be key. Thank you so much. We're going to turn to Dr. Kandel for your experience, and also you have been very instrumental in the endorsement of the principles for locally led adaptation, and I really, from our brief conversation, I can feel that your heart is there, and there's nothing more important than having people who have a heart in what they do. So could you explain to us how you work with the principles of locally led adaptation to create change for people on the ground? Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the organizer for bringing us together and providing the platform for sharing on our achievement, particularly of Nepal, or on locally led adaptation, our learnings and next steps. Nepal announced an ambitious target of achieving complete safeguarding of people from climate-induced risks and vulnerability by 2030. It means that Nepal is a very vulnerable country because of its geography and socio-economic context. So adaptation is our top priority of the government of Nepal. So Nepal has set very good target to reduce climate-induced disaster significantly by 2030. So that is our target. And I feel so privileged to mention that Nepal is a leader in advancing climate adaptation agenda and localizing climate change adaptation. So Nepal is known as the leader of the climate change adaptation. Then the question, why Nepal is leader? How Nepal becomes the leader of climate change adaptation could be, important for other countries as well. So first and foremost, we have localized the adaptation because the impact of climate change is huge to the people. They are the victimized people, in the ground. Communities are victimized by landslide, flood, for example, wildfire. So adaptation should be localized and involved to the people. That is the first message I would like to share with you. We have implemented all the urgent and immediate priorities. So we have prioritized the issue, identified the issue by National Adaptation Program of Action. We have localized climate adaptation covering 300 municipalities out of 700 1953 and benefited more than 50 million people directly, out of which are women and ethnic group. So we have 753 municipalities. Out of that, we have localized adaptation to 300 municipalities yet, and process is ongoing. In the last 13 years, we have built a strong and local-centric policy and institution dealing with climate change adaptation. And secondly, Nepal has decentralized locally owned policy and institution. So, because to localize the adaptation, we do need very good policy and legal instrument, and also adaptation mechanism to translate into ground. So, therefore, Nepal has formulated very decentralized, locally owned policy institution. Then why it is locally owned? That is the question, may be important to you also, because Nepal has, very good practice of policy formulation, participatory policy formulation, where people involved, community involved during the formulation process, and they raise their issues and incorporated in the policy. That policy owned by the local communities. So that type of policy formulation process, participatory policy formulation process is in Nepal. Therefore, policy is very effective to translate into ground. Second, we have policy formulated climate change policy with provision of allocating 80% to resources to allocate the local level for adaptation. Any resources come from the outside, more than 80% should go to the local level. So that is the provision, policy provision in the legal instrument. So therefore, people are owning the adaptation. And thirdly, and most importantly, mainstreaming the policy and program. Yes, we do have policy and institution, but mainstreaming and institutionalization is another agenda that we have to think. We policymakers should think how we can institutionalize the policy into ground. So that is the third agenda that Nepal is doing, because Nepal is a federal country. We have federal government, provincial government, and local level government. So we have to institutionalize the adaptation into 3 tiers of government with different function and responsibility. That is what Nepal is doing. For example, government has itself mobilized more than $1 billion USD through its own resources and secure additional $50 billion USD to support local adaptation plan of action LAPA. So that is very important. In the local level, we are formulating the LAPA for all the development endeavor and included the climate risk adaptation and resilient issue. So that is very comprehensive plan for the local level. So that is also another important message I would like to communicate you. So policy, institution, and commitment is very much important to decentralize the adaptation to the local level, because they are the victimized people. The impact of climate change is there in the ground. Without participating, without involving them, how we can make adaptation effective? So that is my message I would like to communicate with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I joined the World Resources Institute about a year ago, I was Minister for the Environment of the Netherlands. And we had a lot of discussions also about this participatory policy formulation. And I think many people feel that it will slow down a policy process. I think it will actually speed up implementation and effect. Because if the policies are owned and supported by the population, the take-up of those policies and the resilience of those policies, and thereby the resilience of the actions flown from those policies, is much larger. So it's worthwhile investing in it. So thank you so much for sharing these lessons. And we look forward to learning much more from Nepal and everything that you're doing. Let me turn to Mr. Ono. It's such an honor to have you here, Mr. Thank you. Could you share some insights on progress and next steps forward for your climate resilience goals? Please, over to you.
Thank you very much, facilitator, and good morning, everyone. And first of all, I'm very happy to work under the framework of AAC. It's my honor to be here with you. And First of all, we would like to announce that the Ministry of the Environment Japan has endorsed the initiative of LAA principle. We will promote locally led adaptation by supporting local governments and the local stakeholders domestically as well as internationally, because the adaptation climate impact appear in locally context. So the adaptation measures should also be tailored to local circumstances. In Japan, the Climate Change Adaptation Act and the Climate Change Adaptation Plan provides a framework for ministries, agencies, and other stakeholders to work together on adaptation. We have completed the first review process of our adaptation plan last year and amended the adaptation plan by adding a set of key performance indicators for key priority areas and sectors. Regular meetings among relevant ministries and agencies convened, chaired by the Minister for the Environment, to review the progress and enhance coordination. The principle of locally led adaptation is embedded in the Climate Change Adaptation Act as well as the Climate Change Adaptation Plan. The Act requires local governments to develop local adaptation plan and establish local adaptation centers to support local adaptation measures and efforts. Turning to the international perspective, Japan is working very hard on the international cooperation on adaptation. Actually, Prime Minister Kishida announced last year at COP26 that Japan committed to double the adaptation assistance to developing countries towards 2025, which was later incorporated in the the agreement at COP26. In 2019, Japan launched AP-PLAT, Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Information Platform. Through AP-PLAT, Japan provides the necessary scientific knowledge, such as climate change risk information, and the web-based tools to assist in the development of skills needed to develop adaptation measures and plans. Actually, one of the biggest challenges is to raise awareness of citizens on adaptation, because I think it is a worldwide and universal challenge. Yes, we have a plan, we have an act, but the ultimate goal is to raise awareness of the general citizens and mobilize them towards the adaptation actions. We think that the disaster risk reduction concept could be more appealing to general public, because the term disaster risk is more, familiar for the general public. That we would integrate adaptation and disaster risk reduction in a the synthetic manner, and reach out to the general public to mobilize their concrete actions. I think that's our challenge and the next thing we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ono. And I think your last remark also shows that even words matter. And we need to sometimes localize the words to make sure that we connect to what local communities are actually in need for. So disaster risk reduction may be the words that speaks to those communities in Japan that really feel that threat and that feel that burden, and it will get them activated. So thank you so much. And next to that, of course, you highlighted the importance of scientific knowledge, but also How do you organize this process, and how do you follow up? How do you monitor whether implementation is taking place? And I think these are absolutely very important insights. Let us go to a few more detailed questions for each of the speakers. I'd love to go back to Jamaica first. Mr. Samuda, could you share some progress on physical infrastructure, how that is scaling up the implementation of adaptation action in Jamaica? Mr. Samuda, over to you.
Jamaica, as a member of the Adaptation Action Coalition, is proud to report on a number of areas. It would have been in our adaptation communication, which would have been filed earlier this year, but I think one area that we should zone in first, because it is the basis of our life and certainly the basis of all economic activity, and the foundation of human dignity is water. We've seen the global water crisis in many areas, not limited to any one region, affect citizens everywhere. I tell you, we'll prevail, however. So one of the areas that we've made significant strides is in water. In 2016, when the administration changed and we were able to review where we were with water, we had what's known as non-revenue water in and around 70%. Now, 70% is a totally untenable situation, even without climate change. Climate change, however, increases that risk exponentially. Since 2016, in our capital city and its environs, which deals with about 1.2 to 1.5 million people, we have cut that to 38%. And we're working assiduously to ensure that that comes down in line with the developed world in that region to 20%. We're currently in a number of discussions with multilateral partners, etc., to ensure that this non-revenue water project indeed rolls out nationally. This would assist us in ensuring that our National Water Commission is not a fiscal risk, but ensuring that with reducing rainfall, we're wasting no single drop as we ensure that we move towards potable water for all of our citizens. The National Water Commission in Jamaica supplies about 78% of households with potable water. There are other systems, but there is a percentage of our population that we still haven't gotten to. And for us, it is imperative that we don't waste what we collect, waste what we process, waste what we pump, as we ensure that this vital commodity is indeed available for us as a major part of our adaptation. Now, to ensure water is available, we also have engaged significant renewable energy in our process. Just, I think last month, we launched our first floating solar on a 100-acre reservoir. So we're very proud of that. It's 45 megawatts of firm capacity. It'll save Jamaica's water system approximately $6 million US dollars in energy costs annually. We do have, wow, I'm being attacked, but yes. So the basis of a lot of our adaptation local financing has been in our water efforts. Significant work has been done with the GCF and IDB and other funding agencies in building climate resilient agricultural practices. And there are projects in virtually every parish in Jamaica. Now, if anyone who has looked at the Jamaican economy, they can tell you that the agricultural output is directly tied to our poverty rates and our growth rates. Anytime agricultural output dips, our poverty rate increases. Now, with the prospect of saltwater intrusion and deteriorating soil quality, we're seeing real risks that we could erode the gains we've made in many of our in solving our developmental challenges over the past 40, 50 years. So it is absolutely imperative that we not just scale up our ambition, but increase the rate of funding to ensure that our agricultural capacity is indeed resilient to the challenges that we're facing. And the number of projects are wide-ranging. It deals with soil quality. There are many projects that deal with greenhouse. There are projects that deal with training for our citizens to ensure that they're using best practice. But this is an area that we've done particularly well in, and I think we will have to increase our ambition both in access of international funds and in terms of increased capital investment from our side.
Yeah, thank you so much for this such a clear illustration of how water is basically at the basis of so many processes and so many livelihoods, directly and indirectly. and the need to have these investments. And I know that that we have some, Andy Roby also here in the room, so maybe we can talk a bit more about water as we come to the Q&A part of the session. So thank you so much for these very, very illustrative examples, both of the challenge and how you are tackling it. And I think that many other countries can also learn from your experience, so great pleasure to have you here. Dr. Nora Hashina, could you elaborate a bit more? We talked a bit already about the health sector. Could you elaborate a bit more about your priority actions to expand that climate resilience in the health sector? How do you do it, please?
Thank you. At national level, for Madagascar, the priorities for action are first to adapt our vulnerability and adaptive capacity assessment study, which was conducted in 2015. The findings of this study will guide intervention at central level, but also serve as an information reference for our local actors. Indeed, the second priority is to support our local actors in the effective implementation of adaptation measures through the establishment of an early warning system on health and climate. So our health local actors have to do 4 things. First, they have to document local context on health, climate, and sociocultural aspect. After that, they have to realize an integrated monitoring on health and climate parameters, and they have to put an information and alert mechanism on health and climate, and finally, they have to put an response mechanism in case of risk of disease outbreaks by favorable climatic and meteorological conditions. And we think at the international level, we strongly support the fact that the health is not negotiable. So if you want to expand climate resilience in the health sector, this high-level advocacy led by the World Health Organization and global initiative, such as the Alliance for Transformative Action on Health, Climate and Health for a better consideration of the health aspect in climate change, must be reinforced. The clear imbalance between health risk and the impact of climate change and the little part of the funding received by health sector must be loudly proclaimed for a better allocation of funds for the health sector. So, because the availability of technical and financial support allows for better consideration of climate change aspect in health policies, strategies, and intervention.
Thank you so much for that. I think your point about an early warning system for health and climate and following up on that, and you're probably also coupling it to the mandates to then take action, of course, which is absolutely vital in bringing progress to those communities. Thank you so much for that very concrete example of how you're doing this in Madagascar. Let's turn to Nepal. Mr. Kandel, like I said, you've been a leader in supporting locally led adaptation for a long time, and if you're already far ahead, then of course you can help us push the frontier. So can you elaborate from a leader, how are you going to scale out action and integrate it with Nepal's recently updated National Adaptation Plan?
Thank you again. Nepal has already formulated the policy, particularly the policy related to climate change and sustainable development. We have enhanced NDC, nationally determined contribution, in place, which tells that Nepal would like to reach net zero by 2045, a bit earlier than the global target. So, NDC updating has also big implication with adaptation. Without reducing the greenhouse gas, how we can limit 1.5 degree or below 2 degree. So it has big implication to the climate change adaptation and also climate-induced disaster. Number 2, we have National Adaptation Plan, which is very comprehensive with a detail of program. So yes, we have also National Adaptation Program of Action, and we know and we are practicing the LAPA, Local Adaptation Action Plan, so we have all the package in place. So we have also long-term strategy for net zero emission. And besides, we have also climate finance strategy and implementation plan to translate all those policy into implementation. So Nepal has all the policy in place. So that is important message. I would like to communicate you, and Nepal is one of the member country that submitted all the document in time to UNCCC. So Nepal is very firmly committed to translate all the commitment into ground. So that is number one. And number two, yes, then we would like to translate all the policy and plan into ground, and we would like to scaling up our learning to all the municipalities, because we have to reach up to 753 municipalities. So that is important. So we are doing so. But the issue is that we need huge resources. Adaptation is very expensive. You know, adaptation, resilient, and even loss and damage is also another issue in Nepal and everywhere. So that is big issue. Therefore, we are looking for resources, and we are also doing, because the national government is also allocating about 6% of total budget to the climate change related issues, because we are institutionalize all the thing into national policy and program. So number one. Number two, we are also approaching to the global mechanism, global funding mechanism like Green Climate Fund, Green Environment Facilities, Climate Investment Fund, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other mechanism that they are also supporting. So Nepal has done from its side, our side, we have everything. Now support, more support is required from the global communities to translate all the program, including the locally lead adaptation into ground. So that is my another important message I would like to communicate here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. A holistic approach, including finance, but then there's also a need for support to be actually able to finance and drive all of those locally led changes. Thank you so much for this example. Mr. Ono, Japan has been a champion for disaster risk reduction efforts. We already briefly talked about it. And how is your ministry working to integrate DRR and adaptation to move from this planning to implementation, as we recently heard from the other speakers? And is there a way to better integrate efforts to implement the Sendai framework with efforts to make progress on adaptation in this, of course, very important year where Japan is leading the G7, and we will have global stock days of both the Sendai and the Paris agreements? So could you elaborate? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first, I'm very happy to learn that Nepal will be carbon neutral before 2050, so we all need to follow you. And it is important to mainstream adaptation and relevant government initiatives and regulatory frameworks, including disaster risk reduction. And actually, climate considerations are already integrated to disaster risk reduction plans at national as well as local levels. By incorporating the future, for example, future prediction of rainfall, future prediction of sea level rise, have been integrated into the designing of the infrastructure and urban planning. For example, in Tokyo and other big cities, huge water reserving facilities or reserving tanks constructed underground to control the discharge of rainwater to rivers and to prevent flooding. So those kind of climate considerations incorporated into the designing work. And in terms of international perspectives, making use of technologies and expertise on disaster risk reduction, we are providing a wide range of assistance to developing countries, including human resource development, early warning systems, and disaster risk management. The integration, as you suggested, that the integration of stock-taking effort of Paris Agreement next year, global stocktake, as well as the stock-taking of Sendai framework will go hand in hand next year. So I think it's an excellent opportunity to mainstream climate considerations into the disaster risk reduction. As I said, the both stock-taking go in parallel, so we need to have a mutual exchange of information and expertise in that aspect. And you also pointed out the G7 presidency next year. Thank you for reminding me on that. and another information is that India will lead the G20 next year. Both Japan and India are located in the Asian region, and I think Japan and India has a mutual interest on the disaster risk reduction issues. So I think it is a good idea to make an interlinkage between G7 and G20 by, for example, looking at the same elements of disaster risk reduction conversation or discussion in both fora, and seek a mutual integration and collaboration. I think that's a good idea, so thank you very much for reminding me of that. And one thing I'd like to mention here is that the early warning system. I attended a launching event of early warning for all action plan on Monday, led by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. I myself was at the launching event and very excited to learn about that. I would urge all countries to join the initiative and make contribution. And responding to the UN initiative, Japan plans to establish a new and additional public-private partnership initiative to facilitate developing early warning systems in the Asia-Pacific region. The uniqueness of our initiative is the involvement of private sector, private businesses who are doing business on weather forecasting and providing data for early warning to developing countries, as well as insurance companies as well. So with that, I think we could fully involve private sectors, capacities to the development of early warning system in the world. As the first step, a prototype early warning system will be built in Asia to pave the way for entire development of the early warning system, responding to the UN Secretary General's initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think a couple of the points which you highlighted, the need to design for adaptation, and also the crucial role that rivers play, actually, when we talk about adaptation and water management. Many people think about sea level rise. It's actually rivers and smaller rivers that become big rivers all of a sudden that pose a threat to so many people. And then your point on the need, indeed, to use these kind of fora like the G7 and the G20 and the COP like stepping stones to continue to integrate the discussion and continue to move this forward. So very happy to see that Japan will be willing to indeed ensure this collaboration. And also thank you so much for your remarks on making this a public-private effort, because if we see the scale of financing which is needed, we're going to need the private sector to be part of this, and we need to be smart in the way that we create a financial architecture that where public funds leverage the private investments that are needed to protect our people. So thank you so much for all of that, and thank you to all speakers on this panel for all of their reflections. I think there's room maybe for one question from the audience, and I happen to know that Andy Robbie, very actively engaged in the workstream water that we've been discussing so much on this panel, is actually in this room. So if you might want to volunteer to actually raise a question in the form of some comments on what you've heard from the panel so far.
It's a great honour and a pleasure. As a water specialist, I'm glad to hear water coming up a lot in this discussion. As many have said before, water is the shark's teeth of climate change, and I recognise that you've all addressed those issues. My question really is, how do you make this a national priority when it is so important for adaptation? What are the structures? How do you get that policy in place? And if you could comment on the level of political leadership that is needed, because these are hard questions and vested interests play a role. Thank you.
These are crucially hard questions, and they're competing with so many other, of course, priorities. Mr. Samuda, could I ask you to reflect a little that you spoke so much about this, and in your role competing with other ministers, I know what it's like, right, for funds and prioritization. Could you give us a few comments, and then I'll see if any of the other panelists would also like, for 1 minute comments maybe, to add still something.
Sure. So I have, so anyone who's familiar with the British parliamentary system, I have the interesting title dubbed Minister Without Portfolio. The Ministry of Economic Growth is indeed an amalgamation of several ministries under the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister is indeed the Minister of Economic Growth. He has consolidated logistics with our Port Authority and Factories Corporation, National Works for infrastructure, housing, water, and environment and climate change. And persons have often said, well, how do these come together with environment and climate change, the development agenda versus the environmental protection agenda? It's because we've decided as part of our governance doctrine, we cannot separate environment and climate change from the development program. Now, anyone who knows anything about politics, if the Prime Minister takes on a particular issue, as he has done water, it's because significant political importance has been ascribed to this area. So we do get the focus that perhaps other areas would not. We have just completed our national water policy, which is done in consultation with our environmental ministry, all of its agencies, the climate change division, works, housing, to ensure that we're fit for purpose. So there's been a very strategic way in looking at our plans. Now, we have mobilized more from our capital budget than we ever have for our water infrastructure. Our infrastructure was creaking, it was old, it was dated, and it was a victim of significant macroeconomic mismanagement for perhaps 30 years. In Jamaica, taking itself out of the category of macroeconomic mismanagement over the last 10 to 11, it's given us more fiscal space, and that fiscal space has been prioritized to deal with many of the ills and the weaknesses in infrastructure, especially in water. So it's gotten the political importance that it absolutely needs, and the co-linkage between the climate change fight and the environmental protection and restoration space, it's gotten that sort of focus. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we've significantly increased our protected areas, which also protect our watersheds. And we're moving to the more. We are a member of the High Ambition Coalition as well for 30 by 30 by 30. We're at approximately 25% now of our terrestrial space being protected, and we expect to actually get to 30% by 2025. Now this will protect significant amounts of our groundwater, and as you said, it's also about rivers. So we're doing what we need to do to recalibrate our legal framework also to ensure that our rivers are protected and that those who seek to pollute those are sufficiently punished. So we've taken a very strategic look at our water sector because we appreciate it as a significant climate risk.
Thank you so much. And I promised the other speakers that there would be time for one sentence, but there's going to be little time actually. So if any of you has one sentence that we can manage, because we have somebody else who's going to speak to us, give some reflections on what we've been hearing so far. Mrs. Debbie Palmer, Director of Energy, Climate and Environment, Directorate at UK FCDO. So I'd love to wrap up in, let's say, 2 minutes, but please go ahead.
Apologies, I will speak in French and he will translate. À Madagascar, les questions de changement climatique est coordonnées par le ministère de l'Environnement à travers un bureau national de coordination du changement climatique. Et il y avait un comité multisectoriel pour le développement, pour la lutte contre le changement climatique, dont le ministère de la Santé fait partie. À partir de là, c'était décidé que le volet santé fait partie des secteurs vulnérables et tout ce qui est question de santé sont incluses dans la politique nationale de lutte contre le changement climatique, dans le plan national d'adaptation Et également, dans le CTN, notre CTN, il y a toujours des volets sur l'augmentation, l'amélioration de la résilience du secteur santé au changement climatique.
Je parle français aussi, mais je vais laisser la traduction aux professionnels.
Okay, so she's trying to say that the national policy is coordinated from the Ministry of the Environment, but it is very important to have the inclusion, and indeed the health sector participates in the formulation of the national strategy and also the national adaptation strategy. And also it makes sure that health is within the priorities and also within the national determined contribution. So she's talking about the importance of having this intersectoral collaboration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kandel. In 2-3 sentences.
Thank you. Nepal has all the policies in place. I already mentioned that. We have very enable environment to handle the adaptation issues. So policies are in place, no problem. And most importantly, without keeping or putting this adaptation into center or priorities, Nepal's sustainable development is likely to be impossible, because country is very mountainous and it is very difficult to us to conserve, to manage land and water. That is big issues. Therefore, landslide, flood is very big risks and happening every year. So that is the big issues Nepal has. And also important to note that, so because we have policy in place and people are involving, communities are taking role, their responsibility, and also private sector, for example, hydropower, they are also taking responsibility to mitigate the climate change or adapt the climate change. So they have their own responsibility by law. They have to do something if they are intervening or using water resources. So they have to, because that is the environmental commitment, they have to do that. So private sector, they are also taking responsibility for the adaptation. Communities, they are also taking very much responsibility. Government has very top priorities, and we have a policy in place. Therefore, Nepal is the leader, but need more resources, capacity, and technology. That is the future direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so, the fact that it has such priorities also because the people in Nepal are actively suffering already from its effects, and that is why it's so high on the political agenda. Mr. Ono, for you, the final words on this.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to learn that you will be creating a work stream of disaster risk reduction, right? I'm very excited to hear about that, and Japan accumulates a lot of expertise and experience on the disaster risk management, and we can make use of that experience and expertise to the adaptation and loss and damage discussions and implementations. With that, I think Japan could contribute a lot on that discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure that Rebecca Carter will be happy to connect to you to explain more about this work stream. Could I have a very big hand of applause for all our panelists? Thank you so much for being here with us today. Environment at the Directorate of UK SCDO. Please, the floor is yours. It should work if you push the small button there.
Great, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Super. I just wanted to end by giving a very big thank you to all of the speakers and all of the presenters who've made this such a great session today. And thank you also to all of you, the participants, for such strong engagement and enthusiasm. It's clear that there's a lot of fantastic work going on, and engaging through these sorts of coalitions means that we can all deliver far faster and far beyond anything that we can achieve by standing alone. So a sincere thank you for chairing, and to the whole Secretariat team at the World Resources Institute for organising and facilitating such a great session and bringing it all together. As a co-chair of the AAC, alongside Egypt, the UK is really delighted to see events like this showcasing real-world steps that are being taken to accelerate global action on adaptation. I really want to welcome the new work stream on disaster risk reduction that we've been hearing about and how it will complement existing initiatives like the REAP. And of course, we're also really, really excited to be welcoming new AAC members too. It's a really great step forward. So I cannot overstate the value of these kinds of cross-sectoral coalitions and partnerships, just like the AAC, in building resilience and helping us all think about how we're going to adapt to climate change. As we come together in these sorts of coalitions to share best practice, to share innovation and to catalyse practical action, we can really see that that's the most powerful way that we can come to this together to generate change. We in this room, we all know the IPCC has been really, really clear that climate adaptation is still way too fragmented, it's piecemeal, and it's incremental. So we must scale up our ambition. We must scale up our actions to adapt to climate change and to move very sincerely from planning to real life, real world implementation, action on the ground, get going, make it happen. We're making progress. We've heard a lot about it today from Jamaica, from Japan, Nepal, Madagascar. Thank you so much to all the speakers who shared their experiences. It's really powerful to hear your voices. But we know we need much more. There's more to do. We need effective national plans, we need improved understandings of the risks, and we all know that we need easier access to finance and we need more finance. So all of that is going to be really vital as we go forward. So for me, that's why today's event and the initiatives convened through working together are so important. It's only through this kind of continued cooperation that the whole world will be able to stand together and work faster on adaptation to climate change. So again, thank you very much for coming today. I really look forward to continuing the work with the Adaptation Action Coalition members and our partners on such an important agenda. And I wish you a great COP27. Bye-bye.